Brightwood Estate stood on a craggy cliff in Northern California, overlooking the Pacific. The late afternoon sun had turned the horizon into a pulsing orange band that contrasted with the foggy silhouettes of towering redwoods behind the mansion. The estate itself was a Victorian relic, tall spires, narrow windows, and intricate trim that once spoke of grandeur. Now that same architecture gave off a sense of lonesome elegance. Like an aging monarch, it ruled its domain with silent dignity. In the West Wing, Nolan Parker stood by a large window in the second-floor study. He was 71, but the lines of his face hinted at older wounds. He wore a plain sweater over a button-up shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hair, mostly silver, was combed neatly back, and the edges of his jaw were tense as he gazed down the steep cliff. Beneath him, the ocean crashed into jagged rocks, the white foam looking almost ghostly in the diminishing daylight. 18 years. That's how long it had been since he lost Patricia. As if summoned by that thought, a memory flickered in Nolan's mind. Patricia, 19 at the time, laughing in the estate's old music hall. She'd been a brilliant pianist, fiery, unstoppable. He had once guided her career with an iron hand, believing it was his duty as her father and as the head of Parker Music Holdings. Yet his protective nature had turned controlling, and in her final moments at home, they'd quarreled over yet another performance contract. Then she'd stormed off to that mountain retreat, and all he got in return was a phone call about a devastating fire. Her remains were never conclusively identified, but the investigators insisted it was her. He had wanted to believe otherwise, yet the official reports, the ashes, they all said the same thing. Patricia Parker was gone. A heavy sigh left him. He absently touched the handle of the study's door behind him, the same door that led to a corridor ending at the grand hall, the estate's music room. After Patricia's presumed death, Nolan had locked that place up, draped the piano with cloth, and allowed dust to reign. Music had vanished from Brightwood Estate ever since. The sea breeze rattled the windows, bringing with it a chill. The scenic view was breathtaking, but sorrow always found a way to overshadow the beauty here. He turned away, hands clasped behind his back. Photographs lined the walls, old black and white pictures of the mansion's original owners, color snapshots of an earlier era, and, if one cared to dig deeper, a locked drawer containing images of Patricia and her mother also departed from Nolan's life too soon. He stepped into the corridor, footsteps echoing. The place smelled of old oak paneling and leftover cleaning agents. Oscar must have instructed the staff to tidy up the halls again. Nolan's expression hardened when he caught sight of the door to the grand hall. Painted white with gold filigree, it remained firmly shut, a large padlock added for good measure. A padlock on top of the original Victorian lock. Symbolic. The door was a personal fortress to keep his memories at bay, but the house felt emptier than usual, and that emptiness gnawed at him. He was so lost in thought he didn't notice the sun slipping below the horizon. Darkness crawled inside, painting the corridor in long shadows. With a stiff pivot, Nolan made for the main stairs. He no longer had the vigor to roam aimlessly. The caretaker's voice sometimes echoed in his mind, telling him to rest, to move on. But the caretaker had left a year ago, and now, only Oscar, the loyal house manager, kept watch. At the foot of the stairs, a cold draft drifted in from the large front doors. Nolan paused. Old habits made him glance at the small table in the foyer, where his daily mail and messages were placed. Tonight, there was a single envelope he didn't recall seeing that morning. He picked it up, recognized it as some routine correspondence from the local property association, nothing urgent. He set it aside with a short exhale. 18 years. The memory flashed again. The phone call. The feeling of utter helplessness. He closed his eyes, letting the heaviness sink in. Tomorrow would be another day in the same silent pattern, except an unexpected presence was about to break that quiet routine, and he had no inkling how thoroughly it would twist his world. The next morning arrived with a curtain of rolling fog draped across Brightwood's rear gardens. Pale sunlight filtered through the redwoods, casting faint beams into the yard. A battered old station wagon came rattling up the driveway, carefully navigating the cracked cobblestone until it stopped near the servants' entrance on the eastern side of the mansion. Olivia Davis stepped out, adjusting the strap of her worn canvas backpack on her shoulder. She was 19, slim build, dark hair cut just below her shoulders, wearing a lightweight jacket that had seen better days. She looked around, eyebrows raising at the sheer scale of the estate. Growing up in foster care, she'd rarely seen places so large or so quiet. A wave of mist licked at her ankles as she walked toward the back door. She knocked hesitantly and it swung open to reveal Oscar, the house manager. He was short with neat gray hair and a stern but courteous demeanor. "You must be Miss Davis," he greeted in a slightly raspy voice. "Yes, sir. Call me Olivia, please," she replied softly, stepping inside. Oscar nodded. "Certainly. Follow me." He led her through a back hallway. The interior was old-fashioned, burgundy wallpaper, classic sconces, dark wooden floors that creaked. A faint smell of pine disinfectant lingered, as if they'd just polished the floor. Olivia glanced around in awe at the high ceilings. In the distance, she caught sight of tall windows overlooking a garden full of roses, though the fog made them appear like ghosts of flowers rather than living blooms. Oscar guided her past the laundry area and staff lounge. He indicated a small door on the right. "This is your room. It's modest, but it's got a bed, wardrobe, and a little desk. Let me know if you need anything else." She peeked in. A single bed, a narrow window that overlooked the side yard, and old but well-kept furniture. It was more than she'd had in some of her past foster homes, so she offered a polite smile. "Thank you. This is great." They retraced their steps back to the kitchen where a tall, vintage refrigerator hummed. On the counter sat a half-empty coffee pot. Oscar poured himself a cup, then offered some to her. She shook her head, politely declining, nerves fluttering in her gut. She was used to temporary housekeeping work, but this place felt different. Larger, heavier, like it was filled with secrets. Oscar sipped his coffee. "Your shift will generally start after noon. Mr. Parker doesn't like being disturbed early in the day. He's quite private. You'll handle cleaning the corridors, some dusting in the parlors, that sort of thing. But there's one rule you must follow." Olivia adjusted her posture, listening intently. "Yes?" He looked her straight in the eye. "Stay away from the grand hall. It's in the west wing. No one's to go in there without Mr. E. Parker's direct order." She caught the seriousness in his voice. "Understood. Any reason?" Oscar's lips tightened. "Let's just say it holds personal history for him." She nodded, uncertain but obedient. "Okay, I won't go near it." "Good." Oscar set down his mug. "Well then, settle in. I'll show you around the main corridors after lunch." Outside, the fog began to peel back, revealing more of the estate's grounds, rows of carefully trimmed hedges, tall cypress trees, a greenhouse half hidden by ivy. Olivia let her gaze wander, soaking in the quiet beauty. There was a faint sense of gloom that clung to everything, as if the house carried an old sorrow it couldn't shake. A few hours later, having unpacked her few belongings, Olivia started her tasks. The vacuum's hum broke the silence in the side hallway. She dusted paintings, mostly landscapes of redwood forests and sea cliffs. Nothing too surprising until she reached the more central part of the mansion, where the corridors had older, more elaborate frames. Some were family portraits, presumably of the Parker lineage. She paused at one, a striking young woman with bright eyes, standing next to a piano. Even behind glass, the woman's expression spoke of ambition and fierce independence. Who is she? Olivia wondered, but something in that image tugged at her heart, almost like an echo. She shook it off and continued her chores. The hush of the house was so complete that the smallest sound carried. She swore she could hear faint footsteps from time to time, but no one appeared. It made her uneasy. She'd done housekeeping in smaller homes or in modern hotels, always with staff bustling about. Here, it felt like she was tiptoeing through a museum after hours. Come early evening, Olivia stepped outside to the garden for a short break. The sun was already sinking behind the thick line of redwoods. A dull gold hue washed over the old greenhouse. She inhaled the damp air, the taste of salt from the ocean far below the cliffs. Then a distant cry of a seabird cut through the hush. Returning to the house, she passed a corridor that ended in a set of tall double doors with decorative glass panels. They seemed older, battered. A tarnished nameplate by the side read Grand Hall. She stopped, remembering Oscar's warning. Instinctively, she moved closer, drawn by a faint sense of something. A breeze? A whisper? As she leaned in, the wind outside whipped against the house. It pressed on the glass, causing a small moaning sound to escape from beneath the door. If she listened carefully, it resembled the low hum of a single piano key, like a note someone struck and held far too long. A chill skated down her arms. She didn't know why, but the door felt important. It beckoned her in a silent, invisible way. Footsteps approached from somewhere. She jolted upright and hurried back the way she came, scolding herself for being curious. She couldn't risk losing this job. She'd had too many short-term placements. Too many times she'd run out of options. As she turned the corner, she caught a glimpse of a figure at the far end. Tall, slender, silver-haired Nolan Parker. His gaze seemed to pass over her, but maybe he hadn't noticed her specifically. She quickly stepped away, heart beating fast. For a brief second, an odd sensation burned in her chest, a strange mix of excitement and dread. It was as if the house had secrets that refused to remain locked away, and her arrival was a catalyst. But she knew nothing yet, only that something about Brightwood Estate and that forbidden grand hall was quietly calling her name. Night settled early in Northern California, blanketing the estate with thick fog. Floodlights around the property cast pale circles on the lawn, but the corners of the house remained lost in shadow. After finishing her evening chores, Olivia planned to retreat to her small room. Yet she found herself lingering near the corridor that led to the grand hall. She hadn't meant to wander, but her feet seemed to carry her there on their own. As she neared that set of double doors, she noticed how the glass panels were slightly frosted with age. Dust clung to the corners, obscuring the view inside. Through the faint lamplight, she could see swirling patterns on the glass ivy-like motifs. She placed her palm against one of the panels. The glass felt cold, almost unnaturally so, making her heart flutter. Then a sound caught her ear, a shuffle of footsteps behind her. She spun around quickly, expecting Oscar. But instead, from the opposite end of the hallway, she saw the silhouette of a man. The overhead light flickered, and for a moment she locked eyes with him. Gray hair, worn lines on his face, and an unmistakable air of authority. Nolan Parker. He paused, a flicker of recognition or confusion crossing his face. Then, as if deciding it wasn't worth his time, he continued down the adjacent hall, disappearing around a corner without a word. Olivia released the breath she'd been holding. She was both relieved and oddly disappointed. She had been told he was reclusive, but this was the first real glimpse she'd gotten of him up close. Something about him felt heavy, like he carried an anchor around his neck. Still, her curiosity persisted. She turned back to the double doors. She tried the handle, half hoping it might be locked. Indeed, it was. But the old metal seemed loose, and she could see a second lock, a more modern padlock. She remembered her years at the group home, cheap doorknobs and locks, the way she'd learned to jimmy them open with a piece of wire. It had been out of necessity, not delinquency. She'd never liked that skill, but it had come in handy a time or two. She scolded herself for even considering it here. This job was too important to lose. Yet the hush of the corridor felt charged, as though it held its breath, waiting to see what she'd do next. With a sigh, she stepped away, deciding to respect the boundary for now. Padding down the hallway, she reached the staff quarters. Her tiny room offered a lamp on the bedside table. She sat on the edge of the bed, replaying the moment in her head. A weird sense of longing clung to her. Or was it nostalgia? But nostalgia for what? She'd never been in a fancy place like this before, never known a family stable enough to call her own. She forced her mind to drift elsewhere like the list of chores tomorrow. The pay was decent, the living conditions good, and if she towed the line, maybe she could stay here longer than a month. That thought calmed her enough to slip under the covers, letting the hush of the estate lull her to sleep. Meanwhile, in the second-floor study, Nolan stared out a different window, this one overlooking the redwood trees. He'd spotted the girl near the grand hall. Part of him wanted to confront her, to say, "Stay away," in a cold, unyielding tone. But he'd held back. Over the past year, the staff who came through were mostly indifferent, never venturing near that locked room. So why did this one seem drawn to it? He took a sip of scotch from a glass on the desk. Its bitterness flared in his throat, matching the bitterness of memory gnawing at his mind. With a glance at the far corner of the study, his gaze landed on a dark wooden box, locked tight, a box that held mementos of Patricia. Photographs, letters, a lock of her hair. The box had remained unopened for years. He gripped the glass tighter, an old anger rising. He had tried everything to control her future, to keep her safe from critics, from heartbreak, from the harsh truths of the music industry. And in return, she'd fled to that retreat. Then the fire. And so he'd sealed away all trace of her in this house, as though burying her memory would ease his guilt. Yet ironically, the house refused to let go. It was as though each wall and corridor still hummed with her presence. The simplest sound, a faint echo of footsteps, could morph into the recollection of Patricia's laughter. He set the scotch down roughly, causing a small splash. As the hour grew late, the estate quieted again. In the gloom of the corridor, the glass doors of the grand hall glimmered with reflections from outside lights, giving them a ghostly sheen. If one pressed an ear to the crack between them, they might swear they heard a single piano note. A memory or a warning, it was impossible to tell. Midnight was thick over Brightwood Estate. A hush lingered both inside and out, broken only by distant waves crashing against the California cliffs. In the servants' wing, Olivia awoke with a start. She dreamed of a vast, echoing hall. A piano was there, draped in cloth, and someone calling her name from the shadows. She couldn't recall the details, only the sense of urgency that pressed her to find that piano and uncover something hidden. Her pulse hammered. She glanced at the digital clock by her bed, 12:07 a.m. She tried to go back to sleep, but found it impossible. A strange tension coiled in her chest. After tossing for another few minutes, she slid out of bed, threw on her jacket, and found herself walking quietly down the hallway. It was as though her body moved by itself, each step light against the creaky floorboards. She reached the corridor with the double doors. Grand hall. Everything was steeped in shadow, but faint moonlight leaking through a nearby window gave just enough visibility. Olivia exhaled shakily. "I shouldn't," she whispered, voice scarcely audible. Then her gaze fell on the padlock. In the dimness, she pulled out a small pin from her pocket, a habit from her foster days. With trembling fingers, she tested the padlock. It was old. The mechanism gave with a faint click. She paused, heart pounding. "What am I doing?" Her breath fogged in the cold corridor air, but an inexplicable drive pushed her onward. She tried the main handle, which was locked as well, but after a few moments of careful jiggling, it also yielded. The door creaked. She eased it open enough to slip inside. Darkness swallowed her at first, but she located a switch on the wall. A single chandelier overhead flickered to life, revealing a grand chamber coated in dust. Grand hall was huge arched ceiling, tall windows now covered with heavy drapes, chairs stacked against the walls, a lonely upright base in the corner. Front and center, a large grand piano draped in a thick cloth. The silence was profound, as if the room itself had been holding its breath for years. She took a tentative step forward, leaving footprints in the dust. The chandelier's glow was soft, illuminating floating specks in the air. Something about the place whispered of old secrets and unforgotten grief. She approached the piano. One corner of the drape had already slipped off, revealing a bit of polished black. Olivia bit her lip. She carefully pulled the cover away. Beneath was a magnificent Steinway, its surface layered in a fine gray film. Despite that, the craftsmanship shone through, the curves and lines of an instrument built to bring music to life. She ran her fingers over the keys, noticing they were still pearly under the dust. A trembling excitement swelled inside her. She had no formal training. Her experiences with pianos had been stolen moments at community centers or battered instruments in old churches. Yet she always felt a raw connection. And now, staring at this neglected masterpiece, something in her chest fluttered. She pressed one key. A low note resonated, echoing softly in the large hall. It was slightly out of tune, but powerful nonetheless. She pressed another, then a chord. Though shaky, the sounds reverberated with a lonely beauty. Suddenly, a melody seemed to bubble up from the recesses of her mind. It was the same one she'd heard in her dream. Or had she always known it? She couldn't be sure. Her hands began to move with surprising sureness, as if guided by memory or instinct. She played a haunting progression of chords that rose and fell, laced with a bittersweet yearning. The music had an intimate shape, delicate at first, then fervent. She closed her eyes, letting the notes flow. She was only half aware of her own tears trickling down her cheeks. The tune felt so familiar it hurt, like an echo of a past she never lived, or a message left behind by someone she'd never met. Unbeknownst to her, across the mansion's second-floor corridor, Nolan Parker sat up straight in his armchair. He'd been nodding off in his study, a lamp on, a dusty ledger open. But the moment the first hints of that melody reached his ears, his eyes flew open wide. Disbelief wrapped around him like a vice. No, it couldn't be that piece. That piece was his and Patricia's secret. He had composed it exclusively for her 18th birthday, never published, never recorded. The sound was faint, but it drifted through the halls with spectral clarity, winding around corners, creeping through the cracks of locked doors. Nolan felt his heart slam in his chest. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over the glass of water by his side. His legs trembled as he trudged toward the corridor. He didn't understand how anyone could have gotten in there. He'd locked it, changed the locks again. But the music was definitely coming from the grand hall. That theme, that progression, that heartbreak. At the hall's doors, he pressed his trembling hand to the wood. On the other side, the melody soared, raw with emotion. For a moment, he thought he saw Patricia's silhouette in his mind, seated at the piano. A wave of grief and confusion crashed over him. He wanted to barge in, to confront whoever dared to resurrect the ghosts he'd buried. But an overwhelming fear rooted him to the spot. Fear that if he opened the door, he'd see only illusions, or worse, he'd see someone playing Patricia's piece with absolute authenticity. Inside, Olivia's playing swelled to a soft crescendo, then tapered off, ending on a suspended chord that nearly broke her heart. She let her hands linger over the keys as silence reclaimed the air. Her breathing was shaky. She wiped her wet cheeks, baffled by the intense sorrow that welled up from nowhere. She rose from the bench slowly, replaced the drape with trembling hands, and turned off the light. Cautiously, she slipped out of the grand hall, locking it behind her with the same method she'd used to enter. She never noticed the figure that had been standing mere steps away outside the door. Nolan had pulled back the moment he sensed movement inside. He retreated down the corridor, breath ragged. The music had stopped as abruptly as it began. For a long while he just stood there, leaning against the wall, an echo of that forbidden melody pounding in his mind. Who was this girl? How did she know that piece? When Olivia finally returned to her small room, she sank onto the bed, mind racing, unable to make sense of the wave of grief and longing that had crashed over her while playing. Her fingertips still tingled. Part of her felt more alive than she ever had before. Another part warned she might have made a grave mistake. Meanwhile, in his private study, Nolan sat motionless, consumed by a single realization. That melody was Patricia's, and now it's back. Morning light spread across Brightwood Estate in wispy shafts, gently scattering the mist still clinging to the redwood groves. The air had a sweet tang of pine and ocean salt, but inside the mansion's main hall the mood was anything but tranquil. Nolan Parker strode through the corridors with a clipped pace. His jaw was set, and his normally composed expression showed a flicker of agitation. Every so often he'd glance down at the ring of keys in his hand, the new lock key nestled among them like an unwelcome intruder. At last he found Oscar near the dining room. The house manager was inspecting silverware trays, adjusting them for the upcoming day. Nolan approached without preamble. Nolan, quiet but tense. "Oscar, we need to talk." Oscar straightened, eyebrows lifted. "Yes, Mr. Parker?" Nolan. "Last night, did anyone go into the grand hall?" For a moment, confusion clouded Oscar's weathered face. He hesitated, setting down a silver fork. "Sir, as far as I know, no one did. We haven't used that room in Nolan," cutting him off. "I heard music, Oscar, coming from inside that hall." Oscar blinked in surprise. "Music, sir?" He shook his head. "Nobody has access. The staff is aware the room is off limits, and the old security camera in that wing, you asked me not to maintain it." Nolan. "I know what I asked. But if I heard something, it means someone was in there. Did you see anything unusual with the staff? That new girl, Olivia, Oscar pressed his lips together. Miss Davis is quite reserved, but she hasn't caused trouble. She arrived only yesterday, sir. Nolan, voice dropping, change the lock on the Grand Hall's doors. Put a modern padlock if you have to. I won't have trespassing in this house. Oscar caught the anger in Nolan's eyes, but also a layer of something else, fear. He nodded slowly. As you wish, Mr. Parker. I'll arrange it immediately. Nolan spun on his heel, leaving the dining room behind. He hated how uncertain he felt. The rational side of him wanted to dismiss the previous night as an overactive imagination. But that distinct melody had been unmistakably his composition, a piece he'd never shared publicly. Someone had played it, and the thought rattled him deeply. In the staff quarters, Olivia Davis woke with a start. Her mind replayed the events of last night like a dream half forgotten. The padlock, the dusty piano, the surge of emotion. She tried to dismiss the memory, telling herself it was just a lapse in judgment. But her hands still trembled, recalling the notes that had poured out of her. While she dressed in her simple gray sweater and jeans, her thoughts spun anxiously. What if Nolan found out it was me? She badly needed this job, and the estate's quiet environment almost felt familiar in a way she couldn't name. She left her room, heading to the kitchen for a quick cup of tea before tackling the day's tasks. Inside the kitchen, she found Oscar rummaging through a toolbox. He gave her a curt nod. Morning, Miss Davis. We'll need to shift your cleaning schedule a bit, he said without looking up. Olivia, tentative. Sure. Anything specific you want me to do? Oscar fiddled with a brand new deadbolt in his hands. Mr. Parker wants some areas locked up more securely. I'll be installing fresh hardware in the West Wing. Might be wise to keep your cleaning to the main floors today. Olivia's stomach tightened. So he knows someone broke in, she thought. She feigned innocence. Olivia. Of course. Is everything all right? Oscar gave a tight smile. We simply have to respect Mr. Parker's privacy. If you happen to notice anything unusual, you come straight to me. Understand? She swallowed hard. Yes, sir. Oscar paused, noticing a faint crease of worry on her forehead. A flicker of sympathy crossed his eyes, but he said nothing more. Later that morning, Olivia methodically dusted the tall bookcases lining the main salon. She tried to keep her head down, focusing on the gentle scrape of the cloth against polished wood. The air smelled of old paper and lemon cleaner. From time to time, she heard the clanking of tools echo from the West Wing, reminding her of the secret she now carried. Suddenly, footsteps approached. Olivia turned to see Nolan at the salon doorway. He wore a collared shirt and pressed trousers, the lines of his face set in a rigid mask. Nolan. Miss Davis. She fought a nervous swallow. Mr. Parker. For a moment he said nothing, just swept his eyes over her like he was dissecting each move. Nolan, softly but intently. Have you seen or heard anything strange at night? Around the estate? Olivia's pulse throbbed. She forced herself to keep steady. Strange? No, sir. The place is quiet. Nothing out of the ordinary. He studied her face. She sensed an unspoken question behind his gaze. Then, with a curt nod, he turned and left without a word. Relief washed over her, but it was laced with guilt. She hated lying, yet what else could she do? That evening, as dusk filtered through the redwoods, the entire mansion seemed shrouded in a deeper hush than usual. In the West Wing corridor, Oscar finished installing the new lock. Nolan hovered nearby, arms crossed. Oscar. That's it, sir. Short of busting the door off its hinges, no one's getting inside. Nolan tested the lock, clicking it shut with a metallic snap. Good, he muttered. Keep the key in my possession only. Understood? Oscar nodded. Understood, Mr. Parker. Nolan exhaled slowly, gazing at the sealed Grand Hall door. A swirl of emotions churned in him, anger, suspicion, and a lingering ache for the past. If only he could be certain that Patricia's memory would remain where he'd buried it. But somewhere in the mansion, Olivia felt the tug of that locked room. She tried to stay busy, wiping floors and folding linens, yet her mind drifted to the piano's haunting resonance. A sense of sadness she couldn't explain had taken root in her heart. Little did either of them know that the lock was only a temporary barrier. Some truths refuse to stay hidden behind doors, even locked ones, and the music that binds people across bloodlines can be as relentless as the ocean waves crashing beneath Brightwood Estate's cliffs. A gray morning dawned over the redwood coastline. Fog drifted around the estate's edges, swirling like restless spirits. Inside the grand hall, now doubly secured dust motes hovered in the stagnant air. No human presence had disturbed that heavy silence since Oscar changed the lock. But somehow, the lingering echo of last night's melody still haunted the room, as though the piano itself remembered. Meanwhile, in a side corridor, Olivia wiped down the wainscoting, her heart not in the work. She kept glancing at her watch, dread piling up inside her chest. The tension of hiding what she'd done weighed on her, making her jump at the slightest sounds. She tried to focus on dusting, but the hush of the hall felt suffocating, as though it whispered, "You belong in the grand hall. You have to finish what you started." At mid-morning, Oscar approached with a mild frown. "Miss Davis, I need you to—" He paused, noticing her pale face. "Are you all right?" She forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just not sleeping well." He nodded sympathetically. "I understand. Brightwood can be a little eerie. Anyway, Mr. Parker wants you to handle some tasks near his study. He'll be out for a meeting in town this afternoon, so it's a good time to tidy up. But leave the West Wing alone." Olivia. "Yes, sir. Thank you." Oscar walked away, footsteps fading. For a moment, Olivia stood there, breath shaky. Nolan's going out? An idea surfaced, dangerous but impossible to ignore. If Nolan was gone, maybe she could slip into the grand hall again. But that new lock. She clenched her fists. She wasn't sure if she had the nerve. Several hours later, Nolan left the estate in his black sedan, heading down the winding driveway toward the local highway. He had some business with an old colleague in the Redwood outskirts, something about property lines. But his mind was elsewhere. Images of Patricia, the half-finished composition he'd once crafted for her 18th birthday, and the bizarre sense that the music was alive in these walls. As soon as the car vanished beyond the estate gates, Olivia found herself drifting toward the West Wing corridor, the same route she'd walked in the dead of night. She couldn't quell the pull, like a magnetic force drawing her to that forbidden room. She carefully peeked around corners, making sure no one was watching. The corridor was deserted. When she reached the grand hall's door, her heart sank at the sight of the brand-new lock, heavy, modern, and decidedly unwelcoming. She gently tested the handle. Locked, of course. She closed her eyes, frustration mounting. Why do I need this so badly? She couldn't explain it, but some part of her mind insisted that playing that piano again might unravel the strange, nameless sorrow inside her. She withdrew a small set of lockpicks from her pocket. Part of her hated how easily she'd learned such a skill. It was a byproduct of growing up in tough foster situations. Another part was grateful she had it now. But was it worth risking her job? Sweat beaded on her forehead as she knelt by the lock, glancing over her shoulder. She fiddled with the mechanism, biting her lip. The heavy click it made sounded like thunder in her ears. She froze. The corridor stayed quiet. No one had heard, apparently. Slowly, she pushed the door open. The musty air inside wafted out, brushing her face like a sigh of relief. She slipped into the dimness, shutting the door behind her. The stale odor of neglect and old wood greeted her again. Through the dusty drapes, daylight filtered in hazy stripes, illuminating the shrouded piano. Her footsteps echoed. She pulled the cloth off the Steinway once more, running a hand over its keys. Her chest tightened with overwhelming emotion, as though memories not her own were swirling beneath the surface of her mind. She pressed one key. The note shivered in the stillness. Then she began to play the same haunting melody that had erupted from her fingertips before. Tears burned behind her eyes. She had no clue why. The music came unbidden, each chord tugging at a deep well of grief. Halfway through, a sob escaped her throat. She didn't know what the song was called, only that it felt both beautiful and heartbreaking, like longing turned into sound. Out in the hall, hidden behind a decorative pillar, Nolan stood with clenched fists. He hadn't really gone to that meeting. Something about the way Olivia acted earlier made him suspicious enough to pretend to drive away, then quietly return on foot through a side entrance. Now, hearing that same secret composition resonate through the closed doors, he was livid and terrified. He couldn't deny it anymore. Olivia Davis was the one invading the grand hall, and she was playing that piece as though she owned it. Yet her playing wasn't polished or professional. It was raw, emotional, almost as if she'd inherited it. His hand shook on the door handle. He longed to fling it open, demand answers, but old ghosts halted him. The memory of Patricia's tear-streaked face the last day she'd been here, the fiery argument, the accusations hurled across the living room, how she'd said, "You don't hear me at all, Dad." And then she was gone. He swallowed hard. This ends now, he told himself, and finally mustered the will to enter. Inside the grand hall, Olivia's tears blurred her vision. She lifted her hands from the keys, heart pounding. And that's when she heard the door click and realized she wasn't alone. Nolan Parker stood a few yards away near the corner of the room, his lean frame tense, eyes stormy with complicated feelings. "Nolan," low, intense. "Who are you? And how do you know that song?" Her stomach dropped. She rose from the piano bench so fast it screeched against the floor. "Mr. Parker, I'm sorry." Fear crackled in her voice. It's just in my head like it's always been. I couldn't help it." He advanced a step, eyes flashing. "That piece was mine, and Patricia's. It was never performed, never recorded. No one outside this family could possibly know it." His voice quivered with fury. "So how?" Olivia took a shaky breath, tears on her cheeks. "I swear I don't know. I've heard it in my dreams since I was a little kid. I never had sheet music. I can't even read notes properly. It just comes out." Nolan scanned her face, searching for signs of deceit. All he saw was raw confusion and sorrow. For a moment, words failed him. The chord progression that haunted him for 18 years was flowing from the hands of a complete stranger. Or was she a stranger? "Nolan," almost a whisper. "Do you realize what you're playing?" She pressed her lips together, panic coursing through her. "I'm sorry for breaking in. I know it was wrong. Please don't fire me. Something about this piano calls to me." A heavy silence settled. Nolan's heart hammered. He felt the sting of old wounds, but also the undeniable possibility that something bigger was happening. Who was Olivia Davis, really? Long after that confrontation in the grand hall, the house seemed to hold its breath. Nolan had ordered Olivia to leave the room immediately. She'd slipped out, tears drying on her cheeks, convinced her job was as good as gone. But surprisingly, he didn't fire her on the spot. Instead, he locked the door behind them, said nothing else, and retreated to his study. That night, the redwood forest behind Brightwood turned eerily quiet, as if nature itself sensed the tension inside the mansion's walls. A cold wind gusted off the Pacific, rattling windows and stirring the tall pines. Nolan paced the upstairs hallway, a place where framed photographs of Patricia hung like silent witnesses. Flickers of lamplight revealed Patricia as a young girl at a recital, as a determined teenager with sheet music in her hands, and finally, as a radiant 18-year-old. His regrets clung to him like a lead cloak. He paused at the largest photo, Patricia seated at the Steinway in the grand hall, her eyes shining with that unstoppable passion. Nolan traced a trembling fingertip over the glass. Nolan, muttering, "What did I miss, Patricia? Did you leave more behind than I realized?" His exhaustion was palpable, yet adrenaline kept him awake. He turned and headed to a small security closet near the end of the hall. Years ago, he'd installed a discreet camera system for the estate, though he'd let parts of it fall into disuse. Now, fueled by suspicion, he decided to power them up again. An old monitor flickered to life, lines of static dancing across the screen. He keyed in a few settings, cursing under his breath at the outdated interface. If someone was sneaking into the grand hall to play that cursed piece, he needed proof. He'd find out how Olivia acquired the melody. Because if she was lying, if this was some twisted stunt, Nolan's mind swirled with possibilities: extortion, a cruel prank. But deep in his gut, he sensed something more profound, something that both unsettled him and gave him a strange spark of hope. Downstairs, Olivia sat in her cramped little room, perched on the edge of the bed. The light overhead buzzed faintly. She stared at her hands. They felt raw, as though the music had carved lines of sorrow across her palms. Flashes of memory. No, not memory. Maybe illusions came to her. A woman's voice, gentle but firm. A fleeting image of a tall man with silver hair, a smell of smoke. Had she dreamed all that? She pressed her hands to her eyes, fighting back tears. Olivia, whispering, "What's wrong with me? Why do I know that song?" An old childhood frustration returned, the same bitter sensation she felt whenever someone at a foster home demanded she explain herself why she had no parents, why she sometimes talked in her sleep about a melody no one else recognized. Now, that same melody had pulled her into a crisis. She considered packing her few belongings and leaving, but the pit in her stomach resisted. She needed answers. Something about the Parker family, about that piano, was entwined with her identity in ways she couldn't yet grasp. She flicked off the light, lay down, and tried to rest. Sleep was a distant dream. She tossed on the mattress, mind replaying Nolan's furious questions. Outside, a draft hissed against the window, reminiscent of a faint lament. Sometime after midnight, the newly revived cameras in the West Wing corridor captured a solitary figure skulking about. Nolan, in a robe and slippers, was checking the locks, verifying no one else was attempting a midnight break-in. The hallway was dimly lit by a single sconce, casting long shadows across the floor. He paused near the door of the grand hall, testing the handle still locked. Satisfied, he turned away, only to glance back at the old carved lettering above the doorway that read, "Music is the soul's reflection." Those words had been hammered into the wood decades ago. Patricia used to tease him about how melodramatic it sounded. He almost smiled at the memory, but it turned sour as guilt gripped him again. He retreated to the security closet, intending to watch the monitors for a while. In a different corner of Brightwood Estate, Olivia was wide awake, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't make sense of the turmoil in her heart. That day's confrontation replayed in her head. Nolan's raw shock, the anger in his voice, the pain behind it. She felt empathy for him, but also a fierce curiosity about how she'd ended up playing his private composition. Eventually, she drifted into a fitful doze, broken by fleeting nightmares. A blazing fire, the screech of wood collapsing, a woman's cry. She woke in a cold sweat, tears slipping down her cheeks. The digital clock read 2:47 a.m. Olivia, murmuring, Who are you?" She wasn't sure if the question was aimed at the phantom in her dream or at herself. By dawn, neither Nolan nor Olivia had found peace. He dozed off in front of the security monitor, then jerked awake to see no new footage, just empty halls. She had lain in bed, haunted by unshakable fragments of a tragedy she'd never witnessed. The next day would bring more revelations, once Nolan reviewed the camera angles thoroughly and decided how to address Olivia's secret music. But the seeds of suspicion were already taking root, and the haunting nights at Brightwood Estate had only just begun. Late the following night, tension thickened like the coastal fog that pressed against the estate's windows. Despite the locks, the security cameras, and Nolan's vigilance, Olivia couldn't quell the pull of the grand hall. She fought it all day, but as darkness fell, her resolve weakened. Some ache deep in her chest urged her to return, like a half-finished conversation she needed to complete. Shortly after midnight, she slipped out of her room again. The corridor lights were dimmed, casting long, distorted shapes on the walls. She could almost hear her own heartbeat echo in the hush. When she reached the locked door, her hands trembled with both dread and anticipation. She fumbled with her picks, trying to steady them. Every second felt like an hour. Would Nolan catch her? Would the cameras spot her? She inhaled, twisted the pick, and the lock gave a faint click. She pushed the door open just enough to slide inside. The quietness smothered her. Sliding the cloth off the Steinway once more, she trailed her fingertips along the keys. Even through her fear, a surge of relief soared in her chest. She began playing, the same lonely theme. It rose and fell, each note resonating with heartbreak and hope interwoven. She lost herself in the melody until a dark silhouette emerged at the edge of her vision. Near the corner of the hall, her fingers stumbled on the keys, creating a harsh discord. Her eyes snapped up. Nolan Parker stood partially cloaked in shadow, his face taut with anger. Or was it anguish? Her heart twisted. She jolted from the bench, nearly tripping over it. Nolan, voice trembling with controlled fury. "I knew it was you! Again!" Olivia's pulse pounded. I'm sorry, I couldn't stay away. The music, I don't know why, but... Nolan, this isn't about apologies anymore. He stepped forward, eyes dark with conflict. Who are you? In the silence that followed, the estate's old heating pipes hissed softly, like a scolding from the walls themselves. Nolan, quieter, but no less intense. You claim you don't know how you learned that piece, yet you play it like it's part of your soul. That composition was never published, never taught to anyone. Olivia's cheeks were wet. She hadn't even realized she was crying. I wish I had an explanation, she whispered. All I know is I've heard it in my head for as long as I can remember. It's like a lullaby that never goes away. Nolan's chest rose and fell with each ragged breath. He advanced another step, and she tensed. But he didn't threaten her physically. He seemed trapped in his own storm of emotion. Nolan, that melody belonged to my daughter, Patricia. 18 years ago, she vanished in a fire. And now you appear, playing her most personal piece, telling me you've known it your whole life? Do you expect me to believe that's just coincidence? She shook her head rapidly. No, but I don't have a better explanation. I grew up in foster care. I never knew my parents. I had these melodies. They're all I have from a past I can't remember. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry I invaded your space, Mr. Parker. If you want me gone, I'll leave, but please understand I can't control it. I never meant to hurt you or disrespect Patricia's memory. A tortured silence hung between them. He stared at her, seeing not just a scared housekeeper, but a young woman with confusion etched on her face, confusion that echoed his own grief. Memories of Patricia flashed through his mind, her fiery spirit, the arguments that drove her away, the guilt that consumed him after the fire. Could it be, in some unfathomable way, that Patricia had left something behind? Nolan, softening slightly. You have no idea who your mother or father are? She shook her head. No, I was found outside a hospital as a baby, no records. Named Olivia by the nurse who discovered me. No last name except what the system gave me. He exhaled sharply, years of regret swirling in his mind. Could it be possible that Patricia had a child she never told him about? Or was it just his longing, twisting logic? Nolan, I should fire you for trespassing, he said, though the anger in his voice wavered. Yet I need to know more. And you apparently need answers too. She swallowed hard. Yes, more than anything. He closed his eyes for a moment, battling an internal war. Finally, he stepped back from the piano, turning away with a gesture of command. Go back to your room. We'll speak again tomorrow in my study. 9 a.m. Do not mention this to anyone. Olivia let out a shaky breath, tears still lingering in her eyes. Okay, she whispered. As she passed him, she paused. Mr. Parker, I really am sorry for your loss and for all this. He didn't respond. His gaze was fixed on the piano, the cloth half-bunched on the bench. Olivia left quietly, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear her own steps. Once she was gone, Nolan stood alone under the grand hall's chandelier. He drew a trembling hand across his face, trying to steady himself. The Steinway keys glimmered in the low light, a silent reminder of the composition that bound father and daughter in the past and might now connect him to Olivia in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. Nolan, voice cracking in the empty room. Patricia, what did you leave behind? Outside, the fog pressed closer to the windows, as if eavesdropping on the unspoken secrets swirling within. Far below the cliff, the Pacific's waves hammered the rocks, echoing the turmoil inside Brightwood Estate, a collision of past and present, grief and hope, threatening to reshape everything Nolan thought he knew. Morning broke over Brightwood Estate with a pale sun fighting through the coastal fog. The redwoods at the property's edge stood like silent sentinels, their massive trunks disappearing into swirling mist. Inside the mansion, a quiet tension brewed, less visible than the fog outside, but just as pervasive. Olivia Davis found herself summoned to Nolan's study shortly after breakfast. She was nervous as she climbed the sweeping staircase, her footsteps echoing on polished wood. The memory of last night's confrontation in the grand hall still weighed heavily on her. Her heart thudded each time she passed one of Patricia's old portraits. When Olivia stepped into the study, she spotted Nolan Parker behind a large mahogany desk. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the mansion's side garden where dew clung to the hedges. Nolan looked tense, arms resting on a stack of papers. A faint shadow lined his eyes, suggesting he hadn't slept well. Nolan, curt yet subdued, closed the door. She did as told, feeling the hush of the room wrap around her. The desk lamp glowed dimly despite daylight, throwing flickers of gold onto framed documents. On one wall, a tall grandfather clock ticked away, each second louder than it should be. Nolan, sit. Olivia lowered herself onto a leather chair, trying to steady her breath. Yes, sir. He nodded as if to himself, then slipped on a pair of reading glasses. His gaze flicked between her and some old records on the desk. They looked faded, edges curled from time. Nolan, you told me you grew up in foster care with no knowledge of your parents. Did you ever attempt to trace your origins? She swallowed. I did, once I turned 18. I requested files from the state, but they had almost nothing, just a note about me being found outside a hospital in Redwood County as a baby. No birth certificate, no known relatives. He pushed the documents forward. These are contacts from that hospital, or what's left of them. Years ago, I had some dealings with Redwood County healthcare charities, donation drives for music therapy. I'm going to see if I can dig deeper. Her chest tightened with a strange blend of hope and anxiety. You think? Nolan, exhaling. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but the timeline is suspicious. Patricia vanished 18 years ago, roughly the same time you were born. You know her private composition. He paused, tension crinkling the corners of his eyes. If there's even a chance you're related to her, I need to find out. Olivia twisted her fingers together. I don't understand how, but I want to help. For a moment, they sat in silence, the distant crash of waves below the cliffs carrying through the open window. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the glass, sounding like a distant moan. Nolan, we'll proceed carefully, he said, voice subdued. I've asked Oscar to verify your hiring records, see if there's any link we missed. And if that doesn't work, I have another option. She tilted her head. Another option? Nolan leaned back, removing his glasses. There's a private investigator I knew back when Patricia disappeared. Name's Oliver Hayes. He specialized in missing persons. If there's any clue about your parentage, he might uncover it. Her heart fluttered. You'd hire him? For me? Nolan, I'd do it for Patricia, he said, and though his tone was brusque, his eyes flickered with something gentler. And for you too, if my suspicions are right. A swirl of emotions twisted inside her: gratitude, fear, curiosity. She laced her hands in her lap to keep them from trembling. Mr. Parker, I'm sorry about everything. I never meant to invade your privacy. He exhaled, gaze dropping to the table. I know. Just stay honest with me now. No more sneaking into the grand hall. Olivia nodded, blinking back tears she couldn't fully explain. I promise. Nolan cleared his throat, abruptly standing. Then that's settled for the moment. I'll reach out to Oliver Hayes today. We'll see where the facts lead. She rose, stepping away from the chair. Before leaving, she paused, meeting his eyes. Thank you. He gave a stiff nod. Don't thank me yet, he murmured. We've only scratched the surface. As Olivia slipped out into the corridor, the morning light streaming through the stained glass windows caught her reflection. She hardly recognized herself. There was an energy beneath her fear, a longing for answers that had fueled her entire life. For the first time, it seemed she might be on the verge of a breakthrough, and that thought both thrilled and terrified her. 2 days later, a persistent drizzle soaked the Redwood coast. Raindrops pattered against Brightwood's many windows, filling the house with a gentle hush. The sky remained a heavy gray, clouds draped like a curtain over the craggy cliffs. Olivia hovered in the foyer, nervously adjusting the collar of her sweater. Nolan had informed her that Oliver Hayes was due to arrive. She caught her reflection in the ornate mirror near the front door, dark circles under her eyes, courtesy of a sleepless night. Suddenly, the old grandfather clock in the corner chimed once, echoing through the marble floors. A moment later, the front door knocker sounded, 3 firm taps. Oscar quickly opened it, revealing a figure in a long, dark overcoat. Oliver Hayes stepped inside, brushing raindrops from his shoulders. He was in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and an angular face that carried a calm, analytical look. Behind wire-framed glasses, his eyes took in the foyer with keen curiosity. Oscar, politely. "Welcome, Mr. Hayes. Mr. Parker is expecting you." Oliver inclined his head, offering a small smile. Then his gaze landed on Olivia. For a second, she felt exposed, as though he could read her secrets at a glance. Oliver. "Hello. You must be Miss Davis." She nodded. "Yes. Hi." She extended a hand, surprised to find her palms sweaty. They shook briefly, and he turned to follow Oscar down the hall. Olivia trailed behind at a respectful distance, a knot of nerves swirling in her stomach. She had no idea what Oliver might uncover. What if it proved she had no connection to Patricia at all? Or worse, what if it showed something she wasn't prepared to face? In Nolan's study, the windows rattled from the wind as Oliver approached the desk. Nolan stood, greeting him with a firm handshake. Olivia lingered near the doorway. Nolan. "Thank you for coming, Oliver. I appreciate you making time so quickly." Oliver, setting down his coat. "I owed you a favor and it's been too long. How could I resist an old friend's call?" Nolan offered a thin smile. "Let's not sugarcoat. I need you to investigate something important." He gestured at Olivia. "Oliver, this is Olivia Davis, the estate's new hire. She might be—" He hesitated. "Well, we suspect she could be tied to Patricia." Oliver's brow furrowed. "Patricia Parker, your daughter who disappeared? 18 years, correct?" Nolan. "Yes. You remember our search back then? Came up empty. We might have overlooked something." Oliver took a small notebook from his coat pocket. "All right, fill me in." They explained how Olivia knew an unpublished composition from Patricia, how the timeline of Olivia's unknown birth matched the period Patricia vanished. Nolan slid over a folder containing spare information about Olivia's early foster care placements. She had no official birth records. Olivia, voice shaking slightly. "I can't explain it logically, Mr. Hayes, but this music, it's been with me since childhood." Oliver eyed her steadily, then turned back to Nolan. "Any official leads so far?" Nolan stiffened. "None. That's why I want you to dig. Start with Redwood County Hospital records. If Patricia gave birth or even showed up under an alias, we might find traces." Oliver. "I'll do what I can. Hospitals can be protective of old records, but my contacts might help. Also, if your daughter used a fake name, we'll have to cross-reference. It won't be simple, but it's doable." He looked at Olivia. "I'll need some details from you, medical history, the people who took you in as a baby, anything you recall from your foster years." She exhaled, heart drumming. "Of course, I'll share everything I know." Oliver nodded. "Good. In the meantime, I'll run a few checks on Redwood's archives. Mr. Parker, might I also suggest a simpler route, a direct DNA test between you and Miss Davis?" Nolan's eyes flickered. "Yes, that's been on my mind, but I want some background first." He gave a short cough. "Let's do both official records, then the test. I need to confirm there's substance before going down that path." Oliver scribbled a note. "Understood. Let me start with the paper trail. We'll meet in a few days with whatever I find." The conversation wound down, but the tension in the room lingered like static before a thunderstorm. Finally, Oliver stood to leave, carefully pocketing the documents. The trio escorted him to the foyer, where the rain still tapped against the windows. Oliver, quietly to Nolan. "I remember how devastated you were when Patricia went missing. If there's any lead, I won't rest until we uncover it." Nolan's voice was hoarse. "Thank you. I have to know the truth." As Oliver disappeared into the wet gray afternoon, Olivia caught Nolan staring at a painting in the foyer Patricia, mid-performance at a past concert. He looked haunted, lost in what-ifs. Nolan, softly, half to himself. If this is real, if she had a child, then everything changes. Olivia reached out, gently touching his elbow. "Mr. Parker, whatever we find, I'm ready." He turned, expression caught between guarded and hopeful. "Let's hope you are Miss Davis, because if you truly are Patricia's daughter, we're about to open a door neither of us can ever close." A crisp dawn broke the day after Oliver's visit, painting the redwoods in muted gold. Olivia woke early, her mind restless. Nolan had requested she meet him in the family archive room, a section of the estate rarely touched by staff. The idea both intrigued and unsettled her. She found the archive room on the second floor, behind an ornate door with carved vines. Inside, shelves lined every wall, loaded with old photo albums, letters, and documents in carefully labeled boxes. Dust motes floated in the shafts of morning light, giving the place an antiquated charm. Nolan was already there, wearing a dark sweater, hair slightly disheveled. Nolan, quietly, "Close the door behind you." She complied. Her gaze jumped from shelf to shelf, noticing volumes labeled with years and names. Parker Family, 1940-1950. Estate Renovations, 1975-1980. Patricia's Recitals and Press, 18. Her throat constricted. Patricia's Press. She'd only seen faint glimpses of the woman in photos around the mansion, but now, the sheer amount of material here reminded her Patricia had once been the estate's beating heart. Nolan pointed to a small table. A wooden box lay atop it, about the size of a shoebox, edges tarnished with age. "This is where I keep personal artifacts tied to my daughter," he said, voice tightening. "I locked most of it away after she disappeared." Olivia, softly, "You don't have to show me if it's too painful." He gave a hollow laugh. "Too late for that. This whole situation is painful. But if you're truly connected to her, then you deserve to see some part of who she was." He lifted the lid, revealing a stack of letters, a worn paperback composition journal, and a few photographs. The top photo caught Olivia's eye, a young Patricia beaming beside a grand piano, her grin radiant, an undeniable musical spark in her eyes. Nolan, "She was barely 17 there, fresh off winning a local concerto competition. She always insisted on forging her own path in music. Sometimes I was too strict." A flicker of regret crossed his face. He handed the photo to Olivia. "Look." Olivia swallowed, studying the features. The shape of Patricia's jaw, the color of her eyes, there was a faint resonance with her own reflection. A tremor of emotion ran through her, though she couldn't quite explain it. "Nolan, this." He gently pulled out a folded sheet of handwritten notes, some form of musical staff with scribbled lines. Her composition ideas. She'd work on them late at night. He paused. "The core melody you've been playing is on here. Rough sketches, but it's the same progression." Olivia's eyes widened. The scribbles were messy but distinct, the lines full of urgency. She traced a finger over the ink. A pang of recognition hit her like a punch to the gut. I feel like I've seen this before," she whispered. Nolan hushed. "It was private, never published or distributed." "So how do you know it?" She exhaled shakily, tears pricking her eyes. "I don't know. It's like it's imprinted in my mind." A heavy silence settled, punctuated by the distant caw of a bird outside the window. Nolan rubbed his temple. "I spent so many years blocking out her memory. I hardly know how to handle this. Maybe I was wrong to lock everything away." He moved to a battered envelope. Inside were letters scrawled in Patricia's bold handwriting, referencing a retreat in the hills, excited words about creative freedom. Then more letters became tense, hinting she felt stifled by the demands of her father's music empire. Tears burned in Nolan's eyes, but he blinked them away, jaw rigid. "Nolan, I messed up with her. Our last conversation was a fight, if you can even call it that. She wanted to break from my control. I wanted to protect her from the harsh reality of the business. Then the fire took her, or so I believed." Olivia set the photo aside, a lump in her throat. She found herself placing a hand on his shoulder. "If she survived somehow, it may not be your fault she never returned." He lifted his gaze, a flicker of gratitude and anguish crossing his features. "I just need to know the truth." They slowly went through more items, ticket stubs from recitals, news clippings praising Patricia's extraordinary talent, a small piece of blue ribbon from her first piano competition at age 10. Each artifact deepened Olivia's sense of an intangible bond, as if she'd finally found a clue to her own unexplained musical gifts. Eventually, Nolan replaced everything in the box with shaking hands. "Thank you for sharing this moment with me," he said quietly. "It's not easy, but seeing your reaction, It confirms my gut feeling that we're not chasing a fantasy. Olivia, softly. I feel closer to her, even though we've never met. It's all so surreal. He closed the box. Oliver Hayes will keep us posted. And if we must, we'll do the DNA test soon. Let's see if the evidence lines up. He paused. No matter what, I appreciate your patience with me, Miss Davis. I am not used to trusting people so quickly. She offered a tremulous smile. I understand. I'm scared too, but we'll get through it. As they left the archive room, a thin beam of sunlight broke through the overcast sky, hitting the stained glass window in the hallway. It cast colored patterns across the floor, like fragments of hope splayed out in front of them. Olivia took it as a quiet sign that maybe, just maybe, the secrets binding her to Patricia were about to unravel, and the truth would set them all free. Oliver Hayes worked faster than expected. Within a week, he reappeared at Brightwood Estate on an unusually sunny afternoon. The dark clouds had parted, revealing a rare stretch of blue sky. The redwood forest glowed in gentle warmth as if welcoming new beginnings. Nolan led Oliver to the study with Olivia close behind, her pulse thrumming in her ears. Even Oscar hovered discreetly in the hallway, curiosity evident on his features. Oliver, setting a slim folder on the desk. I have some preliminary findings. His tone was even, but a certain intensity glinted in his eyes. I did track down old hospital logs in Redwood County. The trail's faint, but there was a suspicious record of a young woman around Patricia's age admitted under an alias about 18 years ago, pregnant. She vanished from the facility with no formal discharge, roughly 2 months before an infant girl was found abandoned outside. Nolan caught his breath. Do we have any proof it was Patricia? Oliver. Not direct, but the handwriting on the admission form has similarities to her known signature, and the timing lines up disturbingly well. Olivia gripped the chair back for support, head spinning. So my mother could have been Patricia? Oliver's gaze softened. It's a possibility. I'd say a strong one. But to remove all doubt, I took the liberty of coordinating a DNA test with the lab I trust. Mr. Parker, I recalled you once told me you still had some of Patricia's personal items, hairbrush, maybe some preserved hair from a keepsake? He glanced at Nolan, who nodded stiffly. The lab used that as a reference, plus Miss Davis's sample from the cheek swab. Olivia, eyes wide. You already did the test? Oliver nodded. I'm sorry if that was presumptive, but you did say we needed tangible proof. The results came in this morning. He touched the folder. They're here. For a moment, the entire room felt suspended in time. Nolan's throat worked as he tried to speak, but failed. Oliver finally opened the folder, retrieving a crisp document. Oliver, reading softly. Based on the genetic markers tested, the probability that Olivia Davis is the biological daughter of Patricia Parker is 99%, which is about as conclusive as it gets. Olivia's knees went weak. She barely managed to keep her balance, a gasp escaping her. Nolan's face went pale. His hand gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white. Nolan, voice shaking. So you are my granddaughter? Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, her breath coming in short bursts. Yes, I guess I am. A hush fell, only broken by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Nolan's eyes glistened, and he took a tentative step toward Olivia, then hesitated, as though unsure of his place. Olivia, voice trembling. All these years I had no idea I was never alone, I had family. Nolan swallowed hard, extending a shaky hand. She clasped it, her tears falling. Oliver stood by in respectful silence. A wave of emotion crashed between them. Shock, relief, sorrow for the lost time. Nolan, barely above a whisper. I should have searched harder, but I never even dreamed Patricia was pregnant when she left. His eyes brimmed with regret. I'm sorry for everything you went through, Olivia. She shook her head, wiping tears. Don't. It's not your fault. I can't believe this is real. The tension that had hovered for days released in a flood of raw feeling. They moved to the study's small sitting area, sinking into chairs while Oliver quietly excused himself to let them process the revelation. Nolan. If this is real, and it sure seems to be, then Patricia must have survived the fire at least long enough to give birth. She might still be out there. That means we have to keep looking. Olivia nodded, heart twisting. Yeah, I need to know if she's alive. Why she never came for me. A sudden determination lit Nolan's features. His voice steadied, though emotion still shimmered beneath. We're not done. Oliver found clues about her being taken to some clinic or another facility under an alias. We'll follow up. You deserve answers, and so do I. Olivia managed a small, trembling smile. Thank you, Grandpa. The word felt foreign on her tongue, but it held a tenderness that warmed the room. Tears slipped from Nolan's eyes. He didn't bother hiding them this time. I spent 18 years burying my grief. Now I find out that part of Patricia lives on in you. It's overwhelming. But I promise, from here on out, I'll do whatever it takes to do right by you and by her. Gently, she put a hand over his. Outside, the sun shone brighter, dispelling the last traces of coastal gloom. Somewhere beyond the redwood forest, a new chapter of their family story waited to be uncovered, the lost echoes of Patricia's fate beckoning them on. They would face it together. Fog clung to Brightwood Estate as the morning sun struggled against a blanket of low-hanging clouds. The redwoods behind the mansion stood like silent giants, their bark darkened by recent rains. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but electrified with possibility. Nolan Parker and Olivia Davis were expecting a crucial update from Oliver Hayes. In the study, Nolan paced the length of the rug, his gaze shifting anxiously between the tall windows and the antique clock on the wall. Olivia sat on a leather chair, wringing her hands. The weight of the last revelation she was Patricia's daughter hadn't fully settled, yet it propelled them forward. They both knew this might be the day they'd finally break through the mystery of Patricia's disappearance. At last, they heard footsteps. Oscar opened the door, allowing Oliver Hayes to step in. The investigator wore a waterproof jacket spattered with droplets, his expression resolute. Nolan, voice taut. Oliver, any news? Oliver nodded, setting a slim folder onto the desk. I found something in the Redwood County system buried deeper than usual. It seems after the fire, a woman matching Patricia's description was admitted to a local hospital under a fake name. Then she got transferred. The paper trail is complicated, but I traced it to a place called Highland Springs Health Center. It's a private, somewhat remote psychiatric facility. Olivia's breath caught. Highland Springs? Never heard of it. Oliver. Not many have. They're discreet. Probably why she ended up there or was taken there. The logs list a Patty West, admitted for trauma care. The description lines up with your mother's height, approximate age, and distinctive scar on her left wrist, some old childhood accident. Nolan inhaled sharply. Patricia did have a small scar from a fall when she was 8. It's how she first injured her hand. She recovered well, but there was always a mark. He paused, throat tight. So she's been alive all this time, in a mental health facility? Oliver. That's the lead. Could be she sustained injuries or memory loss. These places can operate under tight confidentiality. They rarely share info without a legal directive. He flipped open the folder. We can drive to Highland Springs. It's about 3 hours from here, deeper inland, near those winding mountain roads. If Patricia's still there, we'll find her. Olivia sprang to her feet, heart pounding. We have to go, right? I need to see her. Nolan exhaled, voice trembling with equal parts dread and hope. Yes. Oliver, set it up. We leave tomorrow. You and I and... He turned to Olivia. You'll come too. We'll face this together. She nodded, eyes brimming with emotions too big to name. For so long she'd believed her mother was a ghost. Now the idea Patricia might be breathing somewhere, waiting, maybe not even aware she had a daughter, was overwhelming. Oliver, gently. We don't know her condition. If the fire or something else caused memory gaps, she may not recognize you. Prepare yourself. Nolan swallowed hard. I've lived with regrets for 18 years. Another blow won't kill me. But if there's any chance I have to see her, I have to make amends. Oliver gathered his papers. I'll handle the details. We'll likely need to persuade the clinic's director to let us visit. But I'm sure you can handle that, Mr. Parker. Nolan's gaze darkened with grim determination. I'll do whatever it takes. Outside, a breeze rustled the mist, stirring the ancient redwoods. Inside, the three of them stood in quiet solidarity. After decades of silence and heartbreak, it seemed the truth was finally within reach. All they had to do was follow the winding road into the depths of Highland Springs, into the ashes of a past everyone presumed lost. Early the next morning, Nolan's black SUV rumbled away from Brightwood Estate, leaving the coastal fog behind and heading inland. Olivia, seated in the back, stared out the window as forests blurred by, the tall pines and redwoods shifting to denser clusters of evergreens. Oliver took the front passenger seat, a stack of documents in his lap. Nolan drove, silent and pale, knuckles tight on the steering wheel. After a few hours of winding roads, they emerged from a dense patch of woodland onto a narrow highway that cut through rolling hills. The sky remained overcast, pressing down with a cool gloom. Each turn revealed glimpses of steep ravines, swirling mists clinging to rocky ledges. Olivia, softly leaning forward, "We're nearly there?" Oliver checked the GPS on his phone. Highland Springs is up ahead a small place, one main street, scattered cabins. The clinic is on the outskirts. They passed a weathered sign reading, "Welcome to Highland Springs Population, 2041. The town was tucked among tall fir trees, its streets lined with quaint storefronts. Yet a heavy hush blanketed everything, as though time moved slower here. The mid-afternoon light gave the buildings a washed-out look, and patches of lingering fog curled around telephone poles. Nolan parked near a local diner that sat across from a post office. He glanced at Oliver. "We have a contact for the clinic's director, right?" Oliver. "Yes, a Dr. Patrick. I gave him a courtesy call from the road. Didn't get much out of him. He said their facility is private. But he agreed to let us come by for a consult." Olivia shivered, stepping out of the SUV. The chill in the air was sharper here than back at Brightwood. She zipped her jacket, scanning the street. A few locals in flannel shirts wandered by, their gazes curious at the strangers. Oliver led them to a small administrative building a block away, hoping to confirm directions. As they entered, a receptionist peered at them from behind thick glasses. Oliver, politely, "We're trying to get to the Highland Springs Health Center. Could you—" She cut him off with a slight frown. "Clinic or the private rehab wing?" Oliver and Nolan exchanged glances. "Rehab wing, I believe," Oliver said. The receptionist's lips thinned. She scribbled an address on a sticky note. "It's about a mile outside town, up a gravel road. Not exactly open to public tours. You folks have an appointment?" Nolan, quietly tense. "Yes, with Dr. Patrick." She shrugged, passing the note over. "Good luck, then." Outside, Olivia breathed the crisp air, nerves dancing. She didn't seem too welcoming. Oliver. "Small towns, private clinics. People get suspicious of outsiders. Let's see what Dr. Patrick has to say." They piled back into the SUV, following the directions. The road narrowed and began a gradual climb. On either side, thick stands of pine and cedar closed in. The late afternoon sky dimmed further, giving everything a dusky hue, though it wasn't yet evening. At last, they spotted a sign tucked behind branches. Highland Springs Health Center authorized access only. The gate stood open, but an imposing fence bordered the property. Nolan's heart hammered as he steered through. A long driveway led them past manicured lawns, bare-branched oaks, and a small fountain choked with leaves. The main building was a low, modern structure of pale stone, a stark contrast to the surrounding wilderness. Nolan, Olivia, and Oliver stepped out, exchanging a fraught look. Nolan, his voice a thread. "Let's do this." They approached the doors, which hissed open automatically. Inside, the lobby was hushed, smelling faintly of antiseptic and lavender. Soft classical music played overhead. A slim woman at the front desk glanced up. "Receptionist," professional tone. "Welcome to Highland Springs Health Center. May I help you?" Oliver introduced them, referencing Dr. Patrick. The receptionist made a quick call. Moments later, Dr. Patrick emerged from a side corridor. He was in his early 60s, salt and pepper hair combed back, wearing a neat sweater over scrubs. His smile appeared forced, his gaze cautious. "Dr. Patrick, you must be Mr. Parker and Mr. Hayes. And Miss Davis?" Nolan nodded, stepping forward. "Yes, doctor. Thank you for seeing us." Patrick gestured for them to follow him down a quiet hallway. As they passed closed doors, Olivia heard faint murmurs, perhaps from therapy sessions or patients. Each step made her stomach tighten. Is Patricia behind one of these doors? She forced herself not to tremble. In a small office, Dr. Patrick took a seat behind a minimalist desk. A large window overlooked an inner courtyard where a few patients wandered aimlessly. Fog drifted in from the hills, lending the scene a dreamlike quality. Dr. Patrick, folding his hands. I understand you're looking for someone. A patient you believe could be a relative? Nolan, voice tight. Patricia Parker. We have strong evidence she was admitted here under the name Patty West. Patrick's lips thinned. I can't confirm or deny details of our clients, Mr. Parker. Confidentiality is paramount. But under certain circumstances, especially if it's a missing person situation, there might be a process to verify identity. Oliver. Is there a patient matching Patricia's description? She was believed to have had severe trauma, perhaps memory loss. Patrick glanced at the courtyard, hesitating. Then he exhaled. Yes, we do have a long-term resident who arrived approximately nearly 2 decades ago. She had no clear ID, significant injuries, and amnesia. She does show an exceptional talent for playing piano, albeit occasionally, but I need to consult our records, and I must emphasize, if it's the same woman, she's in a fragile state. A jolt of recognition sparked in Nolan's eyes. Please, let us see her. Dr. Patrick drummed his fingers on the desk. Follow me, but prepare yourselves. If she truly is your loved one, she won't be the same person you knew back then. Olivia's pulse hammered so loudly she could barely hear the squeak of the office door. They left with Dr. Patrick, stepping into the corridor once more. The possibility that Patricia was mere steps away unleashed a wave of emotions: hope, fear, guilt. Nolan's face looked carved from stone, his composure fraying at the edges, and Oliver, usually calm, now had a flicker of anxious sympathy in his gaze. At the far end, large double doors opened to a clinical wing. Olivia noticed a faint swirl of disinfectant and old coffee. Dr. Patrick glanced back at them, a hint of concern in his eyes. Dr. Patrick, this is our music therapy section. She often plays alone early evenings. If the timing is right, we may find her in there. Nolan's hand shook as he reached for the door handle. With a careful push, he stepped inside. The corridor beyond was dimly lit. Somewhere ahead, a single piano note drifted through the hush, fragile but insistent, like a distant echo from the past. Olivia exchanged a glance with Nolan, and together they pressed on, each step taking them closer to the truth. The music grew stronger down the hallway, a slow and halting melody. Nolan, Olivia, and Oliver crept forward, following Dr. Patrick's lead. The air felt charged, as if every dust mote vibrated with tension. At a corner, an open doorway revealed a small rec room outfitted with a battered upright piano and a few chairs. Inside, a lone woman sat at the piano bench, shoulders thin beneath a faded cardigan. Her hair, once dark, was streaked with silver and drawn into a loose, messy knot. She pressed her fingers lightly on the keys, producing a gentle sequence of chords that sounded both uncertain and oddly familiar. Olivia's breath seized in her throat. This woman's posture, something about it tugged at her deepest instincts. Nolan at her side went rigid, his eyes filling with tears. She could almost feel his heartbreak. Nolan, rasping whisper, Patricia. At the sound of footsteps, the woman turned. Her gaze was distant, but for a split second there was a flicker like recognition she couldn't quite grasp. Her face was pale, etched with lines of weariness. But the shape of her cheekbones, the tilt of her head, it was all too close to the images burned in Nolan's memory. Woman, soft, confused. Who? Nolan took one shaky step forward, tears spilling. Patricia, it's me, it's Nolan, your father. His voice cracked on the last word. The woman's eyes darted, searching his face. Then her gaze flicked to Olivia, who hovered by the doorway, trembling. A strange spark lit the woman's expression, as if she recognized a chord in the younger woman's features. Woman, hoarsely, oh, Olivia? Olivia gasped, stepping closer. The name on the woman's lips felt like a punch of raw emotion. Patricia, because that's who she had to be, was trying to connect threads in her mind. The piano keys beneath her fingers trembled from her slight shake. Nolan, voice shaking. God, you remember her name? She's your daughter. Olivia is your daughter." Patricia blinked rapidly, confusion clouding her expression again. "Daughter?" She pressed a palm to her temple. I can't my head, it's so many gaps." Olivia swallowed a sob, inching closer. "Mom? I've been looking for you my whole life." Her words broke off with tears, but she forced herself to stand steady. Carefully, she reached out and touched Patricia's hand. Patricia flinched at the contact, but then something in her eyes softened. There was a tremor in her fingers, a silent conflict raging behind those eyes. "Olivia," she repeated, voice cracking. "I had a baby? They told me I lost everything in the fire." Nolan rubbed his face, stifling a sob. "The fire, 18 years back. We thought we lost you, Patricia. I never stopped missing you." Oliver and Dr. Patrick lingered by the doorway, giving the family space. The older doctor's expression was both sad and resigned, as though he'd seen versions of this tragedy too many times. Patricia's shoulders shook, and fresh tears glistened in her eyes. She cast a frantic look around, as if the room itself might collapse under the weight of her memories. "I remember running. I remember wanting to get away. Then smoke, screams, and I woke up here. Everything else is so broken." Olivia gently placed a hand over Patricia's. The warmth made Patricia exhale shakily. "I don't have all the answers," Olivia murmured, tears still streaking her cheeks. "But I know we can figure it out together. We were here now." Nolan, quietly broken. "We're taking you home, Patricia, to Brightwood Estate, where you grew up, where your music—" He paused, choking on emotion. "Where your music belongs." Patricia trembled, confusion warring with a flicker of relief. She turned back to the piano keys, pressing a single note. It resonated softly, a mirror to her fragile state. "Patricia," voice trembling. "Home? Do I even know what that is?" Nolan stepped closer, gently placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "We'll help you remember, step by step, Doctor." Patrick cleared his throat, stepping in. "I understand this is overwhelming, but she's been here a long time. We'll need to arrange proper discharge, transfer papers, ongoing therapy. Her memory issues can be unpredictable. Are you prepared for that?" Nolan nodded firmly, tears drying on his cheeks. "Whatever it takes." Olivia squeezed Patricia's hand. "I'll help. I won't leave you again." Patricia blinked at her, tears falling freely now. Beneath the layers of trauma, there was a faint glimmer of the brilliant pianist she'd once been, a person waking up from a nightmare. And in that cramped music therapy room, with the battered upright piano and the ghostly notes still echoing, a lost family finally found each other again. 2 days later, Nolan, Olivia, and a subdued but conscious Patricia stepped out of the SUV in front of Brightwood Estate. The drive back through Highland Springs had felt surreal, every mile an echo of lost years. Oliver had arranged for final paperwork at the clinic, while Dr. Patrick agreed to coordinate follow-up care from a distance. Now, the mansion's Victorian spires reached into a sky painted with late-afternoon gold. The redwoods behind stood solemnly, as if witnessing a long-awaited reunion. Patricia clutched Olivia's hand, her eyes scanning the estate's facade with equal parts curiosity and fear. "Patricia," softly, "this place feels both strange and familiar." Nolan stood by her side, face lined with emotion. "You were born here, raised here. Your music filled these halls. I locked it away after we lost you." He swallowed. "But it's yours. It always was." Oscar appeared at the top of the front steps, hands clasped. He recognized Patricia from old photos, though the years and hardships had altered her. Still, a flicker of recognition gleamed in his eyes. "Welcome home, Miss Patricia," he said, voice trembling with respect. She gave a hesitant nod, leaning on Olivia's arm for support as they entered the grand foyer. The smells of polished wood and faint lavender cleaner wafted over them, mixing with a sense of heavy history. Patricia's gaze flicked to the wide staircase, the corridors branching off. Her breath hitched. "Patricia." I remember rushing down those steps to practice God. So many pieces lost in my head." Olivia gently guided her mother. "We'll uncover them again, one step at a time, right?" Nolan led them toward the west wing, where he'd once so fiercely barricaded the grand hall. The hallway was quiet, sunlight filtering through tall windows draped with burgundy curtains. At the end stood the double doors no longer locked. Nolan swallowed, pushing them open. Inside, the grand hall looked the same as it had for years, dust lingering in corners, the Steinway Grand still dominating the center. But now, the atmosphere felt different, alive with a hopeful charge. Patricia let go of Olivia's hand and moved slowly toward the piano, fingers trembling. She brushed the instrument's polished surface, eyes distant, as if searching for lost memories. Then, with a soft exhale, she sat on the bench. Patricia, whispering, "I used to spend hours here. Didn't I, Dad?" Nolan stood a few feet away, tears glistening. "Yes, it was like you were born for those keys." He gestured for Olivia to join her mother at the piano. "Play something, anything." Olivia glanced at Patricia, nodding encouragement. Patricia's fingers hovered over the keys. She pressed a chord, stumbled, tried again, her brow furrowed with frustration. "I can't recall the full pieces, just fragments." Olivia settled beside her, hesitating. Then she began the quiet melody that had first drawn her to the grand hall. It wove through the silent space, uncertain but heartfelt. Patricia let out a soft cry, tears spilling as she recognized that chord progression at some deep, unspoken level. Patricia. That's my, oh God, I wrote that, didn't I?" Nolan edged closer, heart pounding. "Yes, Patricia. You wrote it. You and I called it your personal nocturne before you left." Patricia closed her eyes, letting the tune wash over her. For an instant, Olivia saw a flicker of the woman she must have once been, passionate, bold. The piece ended on a gentle note, and Patricia took a shaky breath, tears rolling freely. "Patricia," broken voice. "So many lost years. I'm so sorry I left, Dad. I don't remember everything, but I know I argued with you. I felt trapped. Then I just ran." Nolan stepped forward, trembling. "No, I'm sorry. I pushed you too hard. I thought I was protecting you. Instead, I drove you away." The two locked eyes. A silent forgiveness passed between them, laced with sorrow for the time they could never reclaim. Olivia quietly placed a hand atop her mother's. "We have now," she whispered. "That's what matters." Patricia nodded, swallowing her tears. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, we do." They rose from the piano, group-hugging in a tangle of emotional relief. Outside, the redwoods seemed to whisper in the breeze, a testament to the estate's long, silent watch over its family. Over them all. A damp, overcast sky draped Brightwood Estate as Nolan Parker, Olivia Davis, and Patricia Parker stepped from the SUV and onto the gravel drive. This should have been a triumphant homecoming, yet the atmosphere felt fragile, like the hush before a long-awaited symphony began. The redwoods bordering the mansion swayed under a chilly breeze, their tops half hidden by pale morning fog. Patricia, wrapped in a light coat that still seemed too thin for her trembling frame, gazed up at the Victorian spires. Her eyes shimmered with curiosity and uncertainty. "It looks different," she murmured. "I remember tall windows, a big porch, but—" Her voice trailed off. Nolan gently placed a hand on her shoulder. He'd barely left her side since they'd left Highland Springs. "We've done some renovations, but the heart of it is still the same place you grew up in," he said, voice tight with emotion. Olivia stood on Patricia's other side, her breath visible in the crisp air. She noted a new tension in the lines of her mother's face. "Mom?" she asked softly. "Are you okay to go inside?" Patricia swallowed. She closed her eyes for a moment, seeming to steady herself. "I think so." They climbed the front steps. The old porch creaked underfoot, and Oscar was there at the door, posture stiff, eyes bright with unshed tears. He bowed his head in a silent gesture of respect. "Welcome home, Miss Patricia," he said gently. Patricia tried to smile, though it faltered halfway. Her hand sought Olivia's for support. "Thank you, Oscar. I'm sorry if I don't remember you clearly yet." A flash of sadness crossed Oscar's face, but he inclined his head. "That's all right, ma'am. We're here to help you settle in." Once inside, the foyer's chandelier cast a soft glow over the polished floors. The estate still smelled faintly of old cedar and polished brass. Patricia scanned the wide corridor, pausing at a large family portrait near the stairs. It showed Patricia as a teenager, radiant and confident, standing beside a younger Nolan. Her gaze flicked from the photo to him, as if trying to reconcile who she'd been with who she was now. Nolan cleared his throat, his own emotions stormy. "Let's get you settled in a room near Olivia's. Just take it slow." Patricia nodded numbly, allowing herself to be guided. The mind she once wielded like a weapon, a brilliant creative force, was now riddled with empty spaces. But each step in these halls felt like both a wound and a balm. She couldn't yet articulate it, but a sense of belonging tugged at her heart, stirring faint memories. Later that evening, the estate's interior glowed under warm lamps, contrasting the cold drizzle outside. Nolan insisted on a quiet dinner in the small dining room, hoping to keep Patricia from feeling overwhelmed. Olivia helped Oscar with the dishes, occasionally stealing glances down the corridor where Patricia had retreated. Finally, Olivia found her mother in a cozy sitting area near the library, staring at a painting on the wall, a moody seascape of the cliffs behind Brightwood. Patricia's hair was down, the silver strands blending with the dark, giving her an air of quiet dignity. Yet her hands trembled, clasped together in her lap. Olivia, softly, "Hey, you doing okay?" Patricia turned, eyes distant. "This painting, I feel like I stood on those cliffs. Maybe I walk them every day, but I only see flashes in my head like old film reels skipping frames." Olivia swallowed. "Maybe that's how memories come back, little pieces at a time." Patricia exhaled shakily. "I'm not sure I'm strong enough to face everything. The guilt, the regrets I left your grandfather ran away. I let you be born without me. How do I fix that?" Olivia gently squeezed Patricia's shoulder. "I spent my life wondering who I was, but it wasn't your choice to leave me. You were hurt, lost. It's not your fault." She paused, tears in her voice. "I'm just so glad you're alive." Patricia's lips quivered, tears falling. For a moment they clung to each other in the quiet glow of the lamp, the distant murmur of Nolan's voice in another room lending an undercurrent of reassurance. "Patricia," voice cracking, "I'll try. For you, for your grandfather. I want to remember who I was, who I am." Olivia nodded, her own tears soaking Patricia's shoulder. "That's all I need, just try." Over the next couple of weeks, Patricia's nightmares came in waves, shadows of fire, collapsing beams, jumbled images of a life she couldn't piece together. Sometimes she woke in the early hours, calling out names she couldn't recall the faces to. More than once, Olivia rushed in, gathering her mother in trembling arms until the panic subsided. Nolan consulted with local therapists, even bringing one to the estate, hoping a familiar environment might speed up Patricia's memory. The therapist, a calm-faced woman named Dr. Freeman, visited twice a week, guiding Patricia through gentle exercises. In a softly lit sitting room with large windows facing the redwood forest, Dr. Freeman encouraged Patricia to talk about the melodies in her head. Nolan hovered in a corner, worried eyes never leaving his daughter. Olivia sat on a small couch, ready to intervene if needed. Dr. Freeman, kindly, "You played the piano all your life, Patricia. Sometimes the music can help anchor your memories. Have you tried sitting at the piano again?" Patricia let out a shaky breath. "It's terrifying. It's like I sense the old me there, pressing on my mind. That me had big dreams, big fights, big regrets." She looked away. "I'm scared I won't measure up to who she was." Nolan's throat constricted. He stepped forward. "You don't have to be exactly who you were. We just want you whole happy." His voice caught on the last word. "I can't lose you again." Patricia closed her eyes, tears escaping. "I know," she whispered. "I'll try. But it hurts." Dr. Freeman nodded, scribbling notes. "Pain often comes with healing. But you're not alone now." Patricia's gaze flicked to Olivia, and a sad smile graced her lips. "No," she agreed. "I'm not." Meanwhile, Olivia was determined to help in every way possible, sitting with her mother during sleepless nights, cooking simple meals together, sharing stories of her life in foster care. Yet that bond, while growing, carried guilt on both sides. Patricia felt remorse for not being there. Olivia wrestled with lingering questions. "Why didn't you come find me if you survived the fire?" but she tried to push them aside, focusing on the present. Nolan noticed how Olivia's hands sometimes shook like her mother's whenever the subject of the past arose. Sensing a need to lighten the mood, he suggested they all spend time in the Grand Hall. A place once locked away in grief now served as a potential stage for recovery. Early afternoon sunlight streamed through the Grand Hall's tall windows, illuminating the Steinway grand piano at its center. Dust motes danced in the golden beams. Nolan had fully unveiled the piano, polishing it until the black lacquer gleamed. Patricia stood hesitant near the bench, one hand gripping Olivia's. Nolan hovered nearby, quietly encouraging. A wave of memory, the sense of once belonging here, unsettled Patricia, making her heart pound. Nolan, softly, take a seat. No pressure, just place your hands on the keys. See if anything comes. Patricia swallowed hard, lowering herself onto the bench. The wood felt smooth beneath her fingers, as if recognizing her touch. She pressed one key, the note resonating gently. A flicker of emotion crossed her face. Pain, longing, hope. Beside her, Olivia settled with a notebook. She'd been practicing and scribbling new melodies inspired by the tune that first led her to uncover her heritage. I started writing something, she said shyly, flipping open the notebook. It's not finished, but maybe we could work on it together. Patricia blinked, curiosity sparking. Work on a composition with you? Olivia. Yeah, like a dialogue. You and me sort of blending the old tune with new variations. A faint smile curved Patricia's lips. That's what I used to do, right? I'd take a melody and shape it. Let it breathe. She let out a breath. I want to try. Nolan watched them settle in, heart brimming with cautious joy. He gently pushed a small stack of blank sheet music toward them. I've dabbled in composition myself once upon a time, he admitted, voice trembling. If you'll allow an old man's input, maybe we can collaborate. Olivia and Patricia both gave him a soft look. Of course, Olivia said, eyes bright. Let's do this. For the next hour, the quiet hall filled with soft, tentative chords. Patricia's fingers stumbled occasionally, her memory failing to supply the techniques she once had. But with Olivia's help, she found glimpses of her old style of flourish here, a subtle chord progression there. Nolan occasionally offered suggestions, humming out a harmony or flipping through pages of half-remembered motifs. They laughed at mistakes, tears sometimes slipping when a passage of haunting beauty emerged unexpectedly, likely a remnant of Patricia's past genius. Eventually, Olivia wrote a title at the top of the page, Inheritance. Olivia, smiling through tears. That's what it feels like, this music we share. It's what led me here and might help you find your way back. Patricia stared at the title, swallowing the lump in her throat. Inheritance, she repeated, voice thick. Yes, it's ours together. Nolan placed a shaky hand on Patricia's shoulder. We'll keep refining it until it's ready. I think we should do a small performance once you're comfortable. Something for friends. Staff just to celebrate. Patricia's eyes flickered. Fear mingled with a spark of excitement. Perform? I'm not sure I can, but maybe that's how I'll find myself again. She gave a determined nod. Yes, let's do it. 2 weeks later, the Grand Hall stood transformed. Nolan had requested Oscar to prepare the space for a private recital, something intimate, for close friends, estate staff, and Dr. Freeman. Flowers adorned the corners, the overhead chandeliers casting warm light on rows of chairs. Even Oliver Hayes, who'd stayed nearby to handle final legalities, dressed in a sharp suit for the occasion. Patricia's therapy had been slow but steady, fewer nightmares, more moments of clarity. She still struggled with gaps in her memory, but a glimmer of hope shone in her eyes whenever she touched the piano keys. That evening, guests arrived quietly, curiosity and anticipation palpable. The hall's acoustics carried the soft murmurs of conversation. Olivia hovered backstage well, behind the side curtains helping her mother adjust a simple dress. Patricia's hands shook a bit, but she wore a calm determination in her features. Olivia, gentle. Take a deep breath. Remember, it's just us here. No critics, no pressure. Patricia nodded, swallowing. I can do this. She glanced in the mirror at her reflection hair pinned back neatly, a faint blush on her cheeks. Not the glamorous young star she'd once been, but a survivor, forging a new identity. Nolan emerged from the corridor dressed in a crisp, dark blazer. He smiled, eyes misty. "Ready? The guests are seated." Patricia exchanged a quick, heartfelt glance with Olivia. "Yes," she breathed. "Let's go." A hush fell over the hall as they stepped forward. Nolan addressed the small gathering with an unsteady voice. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "This is more than a recital. It's a moment my family has waited 18 years for, whether we knew it or not." He gestured to Olivia, who sat at the right side of the piano bench, and Patricia, who carefully settled on the left. A ripple of emotion swept through the audience as they recognized her. Some dabbed at tears, Oscar especially, who stood discreetly by the back wall, visibly moved. Patricia's fingers hovered over the keys. Olivia nodded at her. Then quietly they began the piece, Inheritance. The opening bars were gentle, like a shy conversation between mother and daughter. Patricia's part introduced a nostalgic theme, Olivia's notes responding with a fresh, hopeful counter-melody. The music rose and fell, weaving the old motif that once haunted Olivia's dreams with new flourishes they'd composed together. At moments, Patricia stumbled, but Olivia covered with supportive chords. In those uncertain pauses, Nolan felt his heart lurch, but the two women pressed on. The tension in the hall grew, notes drifting up the walls and echoing in the dome of the ceiling. Finally, the piece reached its fragile apex, an aching harmony that resonated like a prayer for redemption. Olivia and Patricia ended on a soft chord that lingered, a testament to the sorrow and love braided into every measure. Silence reigned, a heartbeat longer than expected. Some in the audience dabbed tears, unwilling to break the spell. Then a gentle applause swelled, and Nolan stepped forward, tears on his cheeks. He placed a hand over Patricia's and Olivia's on the piano keys, sharing that final moment. The applause rose, not thunderous but profoundly intimate, as though every person in the room understood the gravity of what had just been reclaimed. Afterward, the gathered friends and staff drifted away, leaving behind a scattering of flowers and hushed conversation. Dr. Freeman quietly left, smiling and nodding approval. Oliver murmured his congratulations, promising to check back soon. Soon, only Patricia, Nolan, and Olivia remained in the hall. The piano still stood open, the scent of fresh roses in the air. Olivia's eyes glistened. "We did it," she whispered, voice trembling with joy. Patricia turned to Nolan, uncertainty flickering in her gaze. "Dad," she ventured, as if relearning how to address him. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Nolan's breath caught in his throat. He gently pulled her and Olivia into a three-way hug. "I promised myself I'd do anything to get you back," he choked out. "And now we have a chance at the future we all lost." Tears and laughter mingled. The space felt alive with promise, the ghostly shadows of the past lifting at last. Much later, the grand hall sat empty, its lights dimmed. The estate's corridors were quiet, guests having departed. A silver moon peeked through the tall windows, casting faint beams onto the piano's polished surface. Nolan returned to the hall, alone, a piece of blank staff paper in hand. He sat at the piano, heart still pounding with an exhilaration he hadn't felt since the day Patricia was born. Gently, he dipped a pen into ink and wrote the first few notes of a new composition, a reflection of regret, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond of family. His fingers lingered on the keys, recalling how the house had once been lifeless, locked in sorrow. Now, the mansion breathed again, filled with the gentle hum of voices and the resonance of a love that transcended lost years. With every note Nolan wrote, he felt the weight of grief lift, replaced by a steadfast hope.